bro. She walks in with her boyfriend. I don't know if that's still her boyfriend. It was like a Trini guy with glasses. And I'm looking like, okay, am I seeing things? Nah, this ain't her. And he's talking to me, and I was like, bro, is that Solange? She's like, oh yeah, she always comes in here. Her and her family, they always are doing rituals.
Her family.
Y'all, something just went down at the Met Gala, and it's not what they're telling you. Because while the world was busy praising Beyoncé for her grand return, insiders say the real story wasn't even about her. It was about Blue Ivy Carter. And it looks like this wasn't just a red carpet moment, it was a setup. Now here's where it gets messy. Sources are claiming rules were quietly bent, exceptions were made, and somehow a 14-year-old ended up inside one of the most exclusive, adult-only events in the world. And people noticed, fast, because the same night everyone kept saying, she's ready, but ready for what? That's when things took a darker turn, because just hours later, Nicki Minaj doesn't show up. No appearance, no explanation. And instead of staying quiet, she goes online and starts hinting at something deeper, something planned, something not normal. Now insiders are connecting dots, old tensions, industry power moves, and a moment that looks way too calculated to be coincidence. And just when people thought it couldn't get worse, a voice from inside the industry speaks up. A warning, not loud, but clear enough to shake everything. So now the question isn't just what happened at the Met Gala, it's why did it happen like this? And more importantly, who is really in control of the story we're being shown?
Now, according to Cosmopolitan magazine, they're reporting that Nicki Minaj was not invited to the Met Gala, essentially saying that she was banned from the Met Gala. The story gets a little bit deeper because when you read into the article, it stated that back in February, the naughty but nice Rob Shutter had posted on his Substack
something about that entrance didn't sit right. Because the moment Beyoncé stepped back onto the Met Gala carpet after a decade, the focus didn't stay on her for long. It shifted, quickly, and almost deliberately, to Blue Ivy Carter. Insiders say the cameras didn't just catch Blue, they stayed on her. Every angle, every pose, every reaction. And it looks like this wasn't random, because at just 14, she wasn't moving like someone new to this. She wasn't hesitant, she wasn't overwhelmed, she looked placed. And that's where the questions started stacking. Sources claim this wasn't just a mother bringing her daughter to a major event. It felt like something more controlled, more intentional, almost like a debut that had been planned long before the night even started.
10 years.
10 years.
How does it feel being back?
It feels surreal because my daughter's here.
And Blue looks so good.
It feels surreal because my daughter is here and Blue looks so beautiful. That moment right there, it shifted the tone because suddenly it wasn't just about fashion anymore. It was about presence, positioning, and the way the narrative was being framed in real time. And then came the word that kept repeating all night, ready. Insiders say that word didn't just slip out, it was reinforced. Again and again and again. And when people started replaying the footage, slowing it down, watching the body language, they noticed something else. The confidence looked practiced. The timing looked precise. The attention looked guided. Which brings us to the first real twist. Because the Met Gala isn't just another red carpet. Since 2018, it has a strict 18+ rule. No minors, no exceptions, at least publicly. So how did this happen? Sources claim rules don't always break loudly. Sometimes they bend quietly, through influence, through power, through relationships that don't get discussed on camera. And when Anna Wintour gives the signal, things move differently. That's when the narrative online started to flip. People weren't just praising anymore, they were questioning. Was this really just a proud moment? Or was it something bigger being introduced? Because while this was unfolding, something else was happening off the carpet. Nicki Minaj was nowhere to be seen. No appearance, no explanation, just silence, followed by noise. Because insiders say Nicki Minaj didn't just disappear, she started connecting dots. And according to what she's been hinting at, this night wasn't as simple as it looked. And suddenly, that word, ready, started to sound different.
Final installment, but I think that we're watching Act 4, aka
the way she's posing. It's like she was ready. She is ready. That second moment didn't calm anything down. It amplified everything. because now people weren't just watching a red carpet. They were watching what looked like a transition. And the more footage resurfaced, the more one question refused to go away. If this was just a moment, why did it feel like a move? It looks like the narrative didn't slow down after that first moment. It intensified. Because once people started replaying the footage, insiders say a different pattern began to form. One that didn't just point to a debut, but something that felt like a rollout. The language surrounding Blue Ivy Carter stayed consistent. Not new, not learning, always the same word, ready. And according to sources, repetition like that isn't accidental in an environment this controlled. Because in spaces like this, every word, every look, every placement carries weight. And this is where Nicki Minaj comes back into the picture. Insiders say Nicki Minaj didn't just react to being absent, she started questioning the timing. Why this moment? Why now? And why did everything seem to align so perfectly for one narrative to dominate the entire night? Because while the public saw a proud mother sharing a milestone, industry watchers say they saw something else. A shift, a positioning, a signal that something bigger could already be in motion behind the scenes. And then this dropped into the conversation.
Blue Ivy's album, okay? And I think that's why she's introducing her to things. And she keeps saying,
That single clip changed the tone again. Because now, it wasn't just about a moment anymore. It started sounding like a sequence, like phases, like something that had already been mapped out in advance. Sources claim this idea has been circulating quietly for a while, that this wasn't just a one-night appearance, but part of a longer timeline, a transition being introduced slowly so that when it fully happens, it doesn't feel sudden. And that's where things start to feel uncomfortable for some people watching. Because at 14, the conversation shifts quickly from opportunity to pressure. Insiders say the industry has a pattern. Introduce early, normalize fast, build familiarity before the audience even realizes what's happening. And by the time people start asking questions, the narrative is already locked in. Now add this layer. Nicki Minaj continues to hint that what people are seeing on the surface isn't the full story. That moments like these aren't isolated. They're connected, structured, and sometimes carefully controlled. And just as that conversation starts gaining traction, another clip surfaces.
Is there one piece of art that has changed your life?
I would say my children.
Your children?
Yes.
One more time?
My children.
That second piece didn't calm anything down. It pushed everything further, because now the focus wasn't just on presence, it was on progression, on what comes next. And why the messaging around readiness feels so consistent, so reinforced, and so public. Sources say when narratives repeat this clearly, it's usually because they're meant to stick, to shape perception, to guide how the audience interprets what they're seeing before they even question it. And this is where the tension builds again. Because while some fans are celebrating, others are stepping back and asking a different question entirely. Is this natural, or is it being directed? Meanwhile, Nicki Minaj is still at the center of the storm, because according to what she's been suggesting, none of this is random. Not the timing, not the visibility, not even the absence of certain people from the room. Insiders say the more Nicki Minaj speaks, the more people start connecting pieces they didn't look at before. And that's when the narrative shifts again, because now it's no longer just about what happened on that carpet. It's about what might be unfolding behind it. And if this really is part of something bigger, then the real question isn't who showed up that night. It's who is being positioned, and why now. It looks like by the time the night was over, the story had already split into two completely different versions. One, the public was celebrating, and another that insiders say was quietly unfolding underneath it. Because once the initial reactions faded, attention shifted back to Beyoncé, not just as a performer, not just as a mother, but as someone who has always been intentional about how and when she presents certain moments. And this is where the tone changes again. Sources say when someone at that level steps back into a space after 10 years, nothing is random. Not the timing, not the appearance, and definitely not who stands beside them.
It's a secret, and when you guys find out what... I can't see. When you guys find out what
That moment didn't feel loud, but it carried weight. Because now the narrative wasn't just about presence, it was about meaning, about what was being prioritized, what was being highlighted, and what message was quietly being reinforced in front of millions of people watching. Insiders claim that when the focus repeatedly returns to one person in a moment that big, it usually signals direction. Not just a celebration, but a shift. And this is where the conversation starts getting uncomfortable again. Because while some people saw pride, others saw pressure. While some saw a milestone, others saw expectation. And right in the middle of that divide, Nicki Minaj continues to insert herself into the narrative, not physically, but through what she's been suggesting. Sources say Nicki Minaj isn't reacting emotionally, she's reacting strategically, watching how the story is being shaped, questioning why certain moments are amplified and why others are missing entirely, because her absence still hasn't been fully explained. And insiders say, in an environment where everything is controlled, absence can be just as loud as presence. That's when the timeline starts to matter, because the same night one narrative was being pushed forward, another voice was building tension from the outside. And according to what Nicki Minaj has been hinting at, this isn't about one event, it's about patterns, repetition, and moments that look independent but may actually be connected. Then this surfaces. That clip doesn't give answers. It creates more questions. Because now the conversation isn't just about what people saw, it's about what they weren't meant to notice. The idea that something bigger might be sitting just outside the frame, hinted at but never fully explained. Insiders say this is how narratives are controlled. You show just enough to guide perception, but never enough to expose the full picture. And that's where everything starts to escalate, one last time. Because if the timing was intentional, if the messaging was consistent, and if certain voices were kept out while others were pushed forward, then this wasn't just a moment, it was a move. Now the public is split, louder than before. Some believe it was nothing more than a carefully curated family milestone. Others believe it marked the beginning of something much bigger, something already in motion long before that carpet was even rolled out. And right at the center of that tension, Nicki Minaj keeps pushing one idea, that what people are seeing isn't the full story. So now, the question changes. Not what happened, but why did it happen this way? And who benefits from the version everyone is being shown? It looks like the story isn't closing, it's expanding. Because the more this moment gets replayed, the less it feels like a one-night headline, and the more it starts to look like a turning point. Insiders say when a narrative is this controlled, this polished, and this widely amplified, it's rarely accidental. Every detail mattered, every appearance meant something, and every absence raised a question. Sources claim the conversation was never just about a red carpet. It was about timing, positioning, and the way influence quietly shapes what the public accepts as normal. And when you step back and look at the full picture, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. This is where the tension peaks. Because if what we saw was simply a proud moment, then why does it feel so calculated to some viewers? Why do certain phrases repeat, certain visuals dominate, and certain voices stay just outside the frame? And why now? Insiders say these are the moments that define trajectories, when perception is introduced early, reinforced often, and left just open enough to avoid direct scrutiny. Not confirmed, not denied, just presented. And that's what makes this so difficult to pin down, because everything exists in that gray area. Allegedly, according to sources, based on what people believe they're seeing. But here's what can't be ignored. The reaction hasn't slowed down, the questions haven't gone away, and the narrative is still shifting. So now, it comes down to this. Are we watching a natural evolution or a carefully guided introduction? Is this simply how legacy unfolds, or something being shaped in real time? Because if this really was just a moment, then why does it still feel like the beginning of something much bigger?